there was a recent Steam Events auction that closed just today. It was for a loose Steam Events cart only with a case, a repro case.
No, it doesn't add anything.
No, it doesn't. It went for $5,600. That's kind of surprising for a couple reasons. Well, Steam Events has been on the rise the past, I'd say, 3 years, where it was like $1,000 game. Then it went to $2,000 and $3,000. So I think the last few went for like $3,000 or a little bit below $3,000. This was a charity auction. It said for charity. I'm not sure if that was set up within the auction itself, but I'm more focusing on the final price and the amount of bids going on this. Now, Steam Events don't come up for auction. The NTSC, U.S. North American versions don't come up for auction too often. Maybe like a couple times a year, 3 times. So there's a lot of weird looking bids going on. There's a lot of bids from people. There's one person has a feedback of 1. That's always a good sign for a high price item bid.
It's from 3,800 to 3,900 to 4,000 to 4,100 to 4,201.
Yeah, and there's also a person with a 5, and they're bidding the last literally minutes of the auction. So it's a little hard to track how the bid says. Obviously, in eBay, it's automatic bidding based upon a second place sort of thing, where the second place person will bid up the first one, the invisible ceiling of the first place bidder. So, shill bidding. It probably occurs here. It occurs more than people think. What people have to realize about shill bidding is that it doesn't necessarily always mean that the shill bidding won the auction price. The fact that it exists anywhere in between is bad, and this is why. And this is something that's never brought up, even by people in the industry. There's something called it's called auction psychology. What that means is this: when you get into an auction, and I've been in live auctions at arcade auctions, I've seen it for myself. Besides eBay auctions, I've probably done 2,000 transactions on eBay in the 50. I've been on eBay since '98, so that's like 16 years. Oh my god! When you get into an auction, and this is what some articles, you look it up, and they've done research on this. There's studies on this. There's a possessive quality to an auction that when you are in the auction and when you are in the lead, you feel like that you own that item. It is yours. So then what happens is when you get outbid, inside, even subconsciously, your pride takes a hit. Your sense of possession takes a hit. You then want to win that item because you already feel it's yours. It's also a feeling that you could be shamed by not winning it, especially back in the day before eBay started masking somewhat the names of the people. A few years back, 3-4 years ago, you could see who it was. So there's a lot of these factors going into an open eBay auction. It's not purely, well, how much is the person willing to spend with it? That's part of it. But when there's shill bidding involved, when you have an artificial person coming in and screwing with people, that's negative because you're inflating the price, and people will argue, well, the person didn't really want to spend that much. They wouldn't have bid it if they didn't want to spend.
No, because it's an outside psychological factor is what it can be. Even if that's not what it's intended for, that's what happens. It affects the other people who are seriously bidding psychologically. Because I think, to put it more simply, and everything you said is right, but when you look at auction psychology, what it kind of boils down to is it's the competitive nature of humans.
That too.
You are trying to win it. So I don't even see it so much as necessarily. I mean, yes, it is. They have their mind set on it, and it's like watching a game of hockey, or I think a game of basketball is more likely, because you constantly see them score, and then you've got to score, and you keep competing because you both see it as yours, which... It's funny, people think that auctions are going to always be a true indicator of value, but they're not. If you've got 2 particularly hot-headed people in an auction who really want an item, it's not unlikely to see that item go for more than, say, a buy-it-now value, or for more than what it's actually valued at. I see it happen all the time when I'm looking at games. Like, you can go online and you can see people buy games like day of release, and they end up paying $67, $72 for a game that costs $60. Why? Because they got involved in a bidding war,
Sure.
and the psychology of it all took over.
This is from mindhacks.com, and this was written from a guy who wrote about this on the BBC website about auction psychology. Persuasive powers of auctions. I'm going to be reading, and this author's name is his name on the article?
Yeah,
I don't see his name on the article, but this is what he wrote. Another psychological bias that operates in auctions is the endowment effect, where we tend to overvalue things we already possess. I see this with collectors all the time. By encouraging us to connect the bid, our money, with the sale item, bidding on items lets us fantasize about owning them, stimulating a kind of endowment effect. This is why the auction catalog, or the item picture and description on a website, is so important. This forms part of the psychological journey the seller wants you to go on to imagine owning this item in advance. So you'll place a higher value on it, and so may pay more to make imagination reality. So all this is boiled in, but again, like shill bidding adds to that effect. And one final note about a Princeton study that was conducted in regards to shill bidding. This is where it comes into play. Their experiments asked volunteers to play online auctions with different rules. Some of these auctions had rules that encouraged overbidding, like typical open auctions, which most of us are familiar with, and some had rules that encouraged rational behavior, like the eBay structure. With enough guidance from the auction rules, the bidders didn't end up paying much more than they originally thought was reasonable, but only if they thought they were bidding against a computer program. As soon as the volunteers thought that they were bidding against other live humans, they found it impossible to bid rationally, whatever the auction rules. So again, the competitive nature, the psychological effect, not wanting to be shamed up against losing to someone else, shill bidding plays into that enormously.
Well, right, because it's a squirt of lighter fluid onto a fire. So, I mean, if this is going to happen naturally without shill bidding, you insert a couple of shill bids in there to keep the price, basically to stoke the fires. You're adding another log to it. You're just going to keep this going higher and higher. Now, people are going to drop off, but you're still going to find people who are attached to it who are going to go all the way to the top and end up paying more than they should for the item.
So that's what it comes down to. So even if a shill bidder doesn't win the auction, it still has a negative effect by overinflating the value. It goes on. It's not documented. It obviously would not be reflected in any sort of price charting website or any app that charts. That's not in there because, again, that's a nebulous sort of data that's in the middle somewhere. Like, okay, maybe it bumped the price up from 50 to 75 and ended up at 80. You know, you're not going to know who that second or third place bidder was, and that's not going to show up. So to people out there that you know, there's even people that, you know, sort of follow the prices. Just keep that always in mind when these things are valued. That plays an effect. And I'm not saying it can never be avoided between natural humans, as that Princeton study shows, but the fact that the shill bidding helps overinflate the prices, that's why it should be cracked down on more. But unfortunately, it's tough to do that. I'm not sure if that means you have to place a rule on eBay that for high-priced items, you have to have a minimum number of feedback, which would be nice. Or there are some auctions that for high-priced items that you do have to be pre-approved.
I was gonna say, I know in the past they did that. If they don't do it now,
that's up to the person selling it. So for those people, you know, that if they're running a true auction, they're being fair. That's great, because shill bidding can exist in, you know, real life to some extent, because if you get stuck with the item, you know, in person, you got to pay for it. It's legally, you know, binding. You know, in person, a lot more than on eBay, where you can worm your way out of it. So there you have it. We've all been a victim of shill bidding, whether or not we probably even realize it when it comes to retro games. And just, you know, just kind of talk about it. I don't think the issue gets raised enough. And it's fascinating. I love the psychology of stuff like this.
Sure.